They say a house remembers everything. The laughter, the tears, the slamming of doors, the quiet prayers whispered at midnight. All of it lingers, soaked into the walls like perfume that never fades. Sometimes when I sit by the window of my old 2-story house in Maple Springs, I swear I can still hear Daniel's little feet running down the hallway, chasing his toy cars across the hardwood floor. That sound has been gone for decades, but the memory stays. It always does. This house was Robert's and mine, our dream when we first got married. We'd saved for years, scraping together every penny from his factory job and my part-time work at the diner. When we finally bought it, the house wasn't much to look at. Chipped paint, squeaky floors, and a roof that leaked whenever it rained too hard. But to me, it was everything. Robert used to say, "Maggie, this place'll shine once your love gets to it." He was right. I filled every room with warmth, hand-sewn curtains, shelves of second-hand books, and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and hope. When Daniel was born, the whole world changed. He was my reason to wake up each day, a tiny heartbeat that gave mine purpose. Robert would come home tired, his hands rough from long hours at the mill, and yet, the moment he saw Daniel, his whole face would soften. We weren't rich, but we had love. The kind that makes old walls feel like they could last forever. But forever doesn't always mean long. Robert died in a car accident when Daniel was just 6. I still remember the knock at the door, 2 police officers standing in the cold, their eyes heavy with pity. I remember Daniel clinging to my skirt, asking, "Mommy, what happened to Daddy?" How do you explain death to a child when you can barely breathe yourself? That night, after I put him to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and cried until there were no tears left. Then I looked at the bills, the mortgage, and the future that suddenly seemed endless and cruel. I made myself a promise that no matter what, Daniel would have a good life. He'd never feel the emptiness I felt, so I worked. God, how I worked. I took double shifts at the diner, did laundry for neighbors, and sewed clothes late into the night. My hands cracked, my back ached, but every dollar was a small victory. Every time I packed Daniel's lunch for school, I whispered to myself, "You're doing it, Maggie. You're making it." And Daniel, he grew into the kind of boy every mother dreams of. Kind, bright, full of laughter. He'd help me with chores, surprise me with little drawings that said, "I love you, Mom." And whenever I felt tired, he'd hug me and say, "You don't have to worry about anything when I grow up." He kept that promise. When he graduated college, I was the proudest woman in Maple Springs. He got a great job as an engineer in the city, and the day he bought me a new washing machine, I cried like it was a diamond ring. He kissed my forehead and said, "Mom, you deserve everything." For a while, I thought maybe life had come full circle. I had weathered the storm, and now finally, there was sunshine again. When Daniel told me he'd met someone, a young woman named Emily, I was thrilled. He showed me her picture on his phone, and I saw a pretty blonde girl with bright blue eyes and a smile full of confidence. "She's amazing, Mom," he said, his voice filled with that tender excitement that only love brings. And in that moment, I was happy for him, truly happy. I prayed she would love him the way he deserved to be loved. I prayed she'd see in him what I saw every day, a man with a good heart. When Daniel told me they were getting married, I started preparing weeks in advance. I painted the porch, washed every curtain, and polished Robert's old rocking chair until it gleamed. I even baked the apple pie recipe that had been in my family for 3 generations. "Mom, you don't have to do all this," Daniel said, laughing as he watched me clean the windows. "I know," I replied, smiling. "But I want Emily to walk into a home that feels like family." I'll never forget the moment she stepped through that front door. It was a crisp spring morning, sunlight pouring through the trees, the air smelling faintly of lilacs. Emily looked like a magazine cover, a simple cream dress, pearls around her neck, hair curled just right. She was poised, polite, her handshake firm when I reached out to welcome her. "Mrs. Turner," she said, smiling. "Oh, call me Maggie," I replied. "Or Mom, if you're comfortable." She hesitated just a second before nodding. "Sure, Mom." My heart swelled at that. The first few weeks were beautiful. We cooked together, laughed about silly things, watched TV in the evenings. She even asked me for Robert's old chili recipe, saying Daniel couldn't stop talking about it. I thought to myself, this is the daughter I never had. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started with little comments. "Mom, you really keep the thermostat that low?" Or, "Oh, you still use paper checks?" I laughed them off. I knew she was from the city, younger, more modern, and I figured she'd just need time to adjust to our quieter life. But then, there were moments that stung. Once, when Daniel and I were looking through old family albums, Emily smiled and said, "Wow, your mom really loved that floral wallpaper, huh?" The way she said it, light, teasing, made everyone chuckle. But I felt something twist inside. That wallpaper had been Robert's last choice before he died. To me, it wasn't just decor, it was memory. Another time, I was telling a story about Daniel as a kid, how he once tried to fix the toaster and nearly blew a fuse. Emily laughed and said, "Well, he's still bad at fixing things, so I'm not surprised." She meant it playfully, but the words felt like a little knife. I told myself not to take it personally. She was young. Maybe she didn't realize how fragile a mother's heart could be. But it didn't stop there. Soon she started correcting me, gently at first, then more openly. "Mom, you shouldn't put aluminum foil in the microwave. Mom, you can't cook steak that long. It ruins the flavor. Mom, you don't really need to make Daniel's lunch anymore." I've got it handled, always with a smile, always sounding helpful. But every correction left a bruise. Daniel, caught in the middle, would laugh awkwardly. "She's just trying to help, Mom." I'd nod and say, "Of course." But deep down, something inside me began to shrink. There was one evening, a Sunday, when I invited them both to dinner. I'd spent all day cooking. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. Everything Daniel loved since he was a kid. As we sat down, Emily said, "Oh no, Mom, you made all this?" "Daniel's trying to cut carbs." I forced a smile and said, "It's okay. Just one night won't hurt." Daniel glanced between us and said, "Maybe just a little, Mom. After dinner." I packed leftovers for them, but when I looked out the window as they left, I saw her place the container on the passenger seat, and later, when I visited their house, I found it untouched in the fridge. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was silent except for the old clock ticking in the hallway. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, the photos, the memories. Everything I had built suddenly felt temporary. I realized then that love can fade quietly, not vanish, but slip away, unnoticed, like dust gathering on old picture frames. And yet, I still prayed for them before I went to bed, because that's what mothers do. We forgive before anyone apologizes. We hope before anyone changes. I whispered, "Please God, let her see my heart one day. Let her see I mean no harm." Then I turned off the light and sat in the darkness of the home I built, still standing, still waiting, still filled with love, even if no one noticed anymore. I used to think that love alone could hold a family together, that if you poured enough kindness into a house, it would never turn cold. But I learned that even warmth can be mistaken for interference, especially when new hearts start sharing your space. When Emily moved in, the house truly looked like a picture out of a home decor magazine. Her touch was everywhere. New cushions on the couch, candles that smelled of lavender and cedar, sleek white dishes instead of my old floral china. I didn't mind the changes at first. I even liked some of them. The house did look fresher, brighter, but then came the day she moved Robert's photograph. It had sat on the mantel since the day we bought the house. His smile framed against a background of the lake where we'd gone fishing every summer. That picture had been the heart of our living room, a silent reminder of everything I'd lost and everything I'd kept alive. When I walked in one morning and found it replaced by a framed quote that read, "New beginnings start at home," my heart clenched. "Emily," I said, keeping my tone soft, "where's Robert's picture?" She turned from the shelf holding a feather duster. "Oh, don't worry, Mom. I just moved it to the hallway. It fits better there." I thought the living room could use something a bit more modern. It was such a small word, but it carried a lifetime's distance. I wanted to tell her that some things aren't meant to be modernized, that memories are sacred, not decor. But I just nodded. "That's fine, dear," I said quietly. That night, after they went to bed, I took Robert's photo back and placed it on the mantel again. I stood there for a long time, my hand resting on the frame, whispering, "You belong here." The next morning, it was gone again. Back in the hallway. I said nothing. Some battles are too small for a war, yet too deep for peace. Emily worked from home most days, typing away on her laptop, earbuds in. She'd sit at the kitchen counter, coffee mug beside her, a half smile on her face as she scrolled through spreadsheets or whatever her company did. I tried to be respectful. I'd tiptoe around, make her lunch, leave her space tidy. But one afternoon, when I asked if she'd like a sandwich, she sighed and said, "Mom, you really don't have to wait on me all the time. I can handle it." Her words weren't sharp, but they left a sting. I wasn't waiting on her. I was trying to take care of her. the way mothers do. That night when Daniel got home, I said, "She's been working so hard. You should remind her to eat lunch." He smiled. "Emily's fine, Mom. You worry too much." I forced a smile, swallowing the ache that followed. That's what love does sometimes. It teaches you to swallow the ache quietly. The weeks rolled by. Spring turned to summer. The maple trees outside the house grew thick with green, and the air smelled of rain and barbecue smoke. But inside, the air felt heavier. Emily and I started talking less. When we did, our words danced around politeness, but never touched comfort. She'd laugh at things I didn't understand. TikTok videos, celebrity jokes, office gossip. I'd listen, smile faintly, then return to my chores. I found myself talking more to the houseplants. "You're growing nicely," I'd tell the fern on the windowsill. "At least someone's listening." Once, when Daniel came home, I asked him if he'd join me for a walk like we used to. Before he could answer, Emily said, "Honey, we promised to meet Mark and Lila tonight, remember?" "Oh, right," he said quickly, turning to me. "Maybe tomorrow." "Mom, tomorrow." But tomorrow never seemed to come. It was during the 4th of July barbecue that the first real wound cut deep. We had invited a few neighbors and relatives. Nothing fancy. Just burgers, salads, and laughter on the back porch. I'd marinated the chicken all morning and was thrilled to have everyone together. As I carried a bowl of coleslaw outside, Emily laughed at something one of Daniel's co-workers said. Her laughter rang bright and easy until she saw me. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice half teasing. "You made your coleslaw again? You really love mayonnaise, don't you?" The table burst into gentle laughter. I smiled, though my cheeks burned. Daniel chuckled, adding, "Yeah, Mom, she does love her mayo. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even meant to hurt." But for some reason the words hit hard. Maybe because I'd spent hours preparing everything, hoping they'd notice the love, not the mayonnaise. Later that night, after everyone left, I found myself scrubbing the counters long after they were already clean. Emily came into the kitchen, still smiling from the party. "Don't be upset, Mom," she said lightly. "I was just joking." "I know, dear," I said softly. "I just take my cooking too seriously, I guess." She laughed, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs. I watched her go, my chest tightening. Sometimes it isn't what people say that hurts. It's what they don't understand they've said. As months passed, I began to fade into the background of my own home. When Daniel and Emily discussed plans, vacations, bills, furniture, I was there but invisible. If I suggested anything, Emily would smile and say, "That's okay, Mom. We've got it handled." One evening, I tried to tell Daniel about a strange noise the washing machine was making. Before I finished, Emily said, "Don't worry, I'll call a technician." Mom always worries about little things. Daniel smiled at her and said, "You always take care of everything." The pride in his voice stung more than it should have. I was proud of her too. She was organized, capable, modern. But in the process, I felt myself disappearing. The house that once pulsed with Robert's laughter and Daniel's childhood songs now echoed with the faint clicking of Emily's keyboard and the hum of her smart home devices. One night, I walked out to the porch and looked at the stars. They were the same ones Robert and I used to count when we first moved here. I whispered, "I'm still here, you know. Even if no one notices." A breeze rustled through the trees as if to answer, and I held on to that small comfort. The change between us wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like slow erosion. But erosion, left unchecked, can hollow out even the strongest cliffs. The more distant I felt from her, the more I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe I was too old-fashioned, too emotional. So I tried again. I baked cookies, left small notes on the fridge. "Have a great day. Love, Mom." She'd smile politely, say, "Thanks," and go about her morning. Once, when she was sick with the flu, I made her soup and sat by her bedside. She thanked me but scrolled on her phone the whole time. I wanted to tuck her hair behind her ear, to show her affection the way mothers do. But something held me back. The invisible line that said, "She isn't yours to mother." That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom so Daniel wouldn't hear. As summer turned to fall, the silence between us grew louder. The final straw came one Sunday morning. I'd accidentally shrunk one of Daniel's sweaters in the dryer. When Emily found out, she sighed dramatically and said, "Mom, you can't dry wool." Everyone knows that. Her tone was sharp, but what hurt most was Daniel's silence. He just stood there looking uncomfortable, saying nothing. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "I didn't realize." "It's fine," she said quickly, though her voice was anything but fine. She grabbed her purse and left for the grocery store. Daniel followed her out after a few moments. I heard the car start, then fade down the street. I sat on the couch, sweater in my hands, the smell of detergent thick in the air. I felt small. Smaller than I had in years. I thought about Robert, about how he used to say, "Family isn't about who's right, it's about who stays kind." So that night, I made them dinner again. Chicken Alfredo, their favorite. When they came home, I smiled and said, "I thought we could eat together tonight." Emily looked surprised. "Oh, sure, Mom." We ate quietly. The tension eased just a little. When she complimented the sauce, I felt warmth return to my chest. Fragile but real. And for the first time in months, I dared to hope, maybe, just maybe, we could still find our way back. I remember the first time she truly made me feel small. It wasn't loud or cruel. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that sinks under your skin and stays there, whispering that maybe you don't belong anymore. It started with something as simple as a dinner invitation. Daniel had always loved Sunday dinners. Ever since he was little, he'd called it family night. Even when he was away at college, he'd phone me to say, "Don't start without me, Mom." So when Emily and Daniel married, I kept the tradition alive. Every Sunday I'd set the table, light a candle or two, and make something special. Pot roast, mac and cheese, apple pie. But one Sunday, as I stood in the kitchen whisking gravy, Emily came in holding her phone. "Mom," she said gently, "I hope you don't mind, but Daniel and I made reservations at this new place downtown tonight. I totally forgot about your dinner." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my surprise. "I didn't know." "Yeah, it's just one of his coworkers got us in. It's a new spot, really hard to book." She smiled. "We'll join you next week, I promise." I smiled back, though my throat felt tight. "Of course, dear." "Have fun." They left around 6, all dressed up, her in a cream dress, him in a crisp blue shirt. I watched from the window as their car disappeared down the street, the sound of laughter trailing behind them. The house fell silent. I turned off the stove, covered the food, and sat alone at the table. The candles flickered, their light trembling against the window pane. For the first time in years, Sunday dinner was for one. I told myself not to take it personally, that young couples needed their space. But as I washed the dishes later that night, I found myself whispering, "He used to say no dinner was complete without me." The following morning, Daniel stopped by the kitchen on his way to work. "Hey, Mom," he said cheerfully. "Sorry about last night. You know how spontaneous Emily can be." "It's all right," I said softly. "I'm glad you had fun." "She said you looked a bit hurt," he added, searching my face. "I wasn't hurt," I lied. "Just surprised." He smiled, kissed my forehead and said, "You're the best, Mom." I smiled too, but my heart ached. Because love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades, one skipped dinner at a time. A few weeks later, I found myself at the grocery store, running into one of Daniel's old friends, Hannah. She used to come over all the time when they were teenagers. "Margaret," she said warmly, hugging me. "It's been ages. How are you?" "Oh, I'm fine, dear. How are you?" "Great. Actually, I saw Daniel and Emily at the bistro last weekend. You looked lovely." I blinked. "Oh, I wasn't there." "Oh?" She looked confused. "They said they were having dinner with family." It was such a small comment, just a passing remark. But it hit me like a stone. Family, without me. I forced a smile. "They probably meant Emily's parents." "Oh, that makes sense," Hannah said quickly. "They seem really close." "Yes," I replied. "They are." When I got home, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. My chest felt heavy. It wasn't jealousy. It was displacement. Like my place in Daniel's life was being quietly rewritten, one line at a time. That evening, Emily came home humming, carrying grocery bags. "Hey, Mom," she said cheerfully. "Could you hand me the olive oil?" I nodded and passed it to her. "You had dinner with your parents last weekend?" She glanced up, a little startled. "Oh, yeah. They wanted to try that new place Daniel liked." "Why?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "I just ran into Hannah. She mentioned seeing you both there." Her smile wavered for a second, then returned. "Yeah, it was last minute. I didn't think you'd want to come. It's a long drive and kind of noisy." "I would have come," I said softly. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she might apologize. But instead she said, "Next time, we'll plan it better." And just like that, she turned back to the stove. Her words sounded kind, but they left a hollow echo behind. Next time. There's always a next time that never comes. Over the following weeks, I began noticing more small things, things no one else would have seen. If friends came over, Emily would tell stories that subtly made me sound forgetful or out of touch. "Margaret's so sweet," she'd say with a laugh. "But she still keeps her grocery list on paper. We're trying to get her into using the app." Everyone would chuckle, and I'd smile too, because what else could I do? Once I overheard her on the phone saying, "It's not that she's mean. She's just old-fashioned. You know how moms are." The words shouldn't have hurt, but they did, because I wasn't just a mom. I was his mom. The woman who'd taught him to walk, to read, to love. And now I was someone to be tolerated. A relic of a time gone by. The wound deepened one evening when Daniel invited a few colleagues for dinner. I worked all day preparing their favorite: roast beef, mashed potatoes, and homemade rolls. When Emily came home, she frowned slightly. "Oh, you cooked?" "I was going to order from that Italian place. I thought home-cooked would be nice," I said, smiling. "It's fine," she said after a pause, though her tone wasn't convincing. "We'll make it work." During dinner, one of Daniel's friends complimented the food. "This is incredible," he said. "Emily, you're quite the chef." Before I could say a word, Emily laughed and said, "Oh, this? I just helped with the sides." The table laughed, and Daniel smiled proudly at her. I sat quietly, cutting my meat, feeling the heat creep up my neck. It wasn't jealousy. It was invisibility. After the guests left, I started cleaning up. Emily came into the kitchen and said lightly, "You don't have to clean everything right now." "Mom, I like to finish what I start," I said softly. She smiled, unaware of the tears burning behind my eyes. That night, when everyone was asleep, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The air was cool, carrying the faint sound of crickets. I thought of Robert, how he used to squeeze my hand when I felt left out at gatherings, how he'd whisper, "You're the heart of this family, Maggie." Now, sitting there in the quiet, I wondered if hearts could be replaced or simply forgotten. I didn't blame Emily. She wasn't cruel. She was just unaware. Maybe she didn't realize how her words landed, how her laughter sometimes turned into tiny knives. But the silence between us grew heavier with each passing day, and I began to realize that love, once bruised, doesn't heal overnight. It needs time. It needs recognition. But above all, it needs respect. That was the first wound. Not loud, not violent, just quiet enough to echo for years. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. That deeper cuts were coming, sharper words, heavier silences. But I also didn't know that someday, the same woman who unknowingly hurt me would fall to her knees and say the words I'd waited so long to hear. "I'm sorry." Some hurts arrive softly, like frost on a window pane. You don't notice them at first. Then one morning, you wake up and realize the view has changed forever. It happened one Saturday in early autumn. The leaves outside were copper and gold, and the neighborhood smelled faintly of pumpkin spice and burning wood. Daniel had invited a few friends over to watch the football game. Emily was in charge of snacks. I offered to help. She hesitated. "Mom, I don't want you to tire yourself out. It's just chips and dip. I'll just make my cheese bites," I said. "They've always been his favorite." She smiled thinly. "Sure, just don't go overboard." I laughed, pretending not to feel the sting. When have I ever? By the time the guests arrived, the living room was full of laughter, beer bottles clinking, the television roaring. I stood by the kitchen counter, placing the cheese bites on a platter. "Guys," Emily called, "you have to try these. They're my mother-in-law's legendary cheese bites. Daniel grew up on these, so be kind. Nostalgia makes them taste better." Everyone laughed. My cheeks warmed. I forced a smile, telling myself it was harmless. But a small voice inside whispered, "That wasn't kind. That was a performance." Later during halftime, I joined them with a tray of fresh lemonade. Daniel reached for a glass, but Emily stopped him. "Honey, not that one. Mom still uses real sugar." "You know how your trainer feels about that." Everyone chuckled again. Daniel grinned sheepishly. "It's okay," he said. "One won't hurt." But the laughter had already landed, small and sharp. That night, after the guests left, I stood at the sink washing dishes while Emily scrolled on her phone nearby. "You did great tonight," I said softly. She looked up. "Thanks." "Everyone seemed to have fun." "They did," I said, pausing. "But maybe don't joke about the food next time. It makes me feel—" "Oh, Mom," she interrupted, laughing lightly. "You're too sensitive. I was just teasing." "Maybe," I whispered. She kissed my cheek absently. "You have to learn to laugh at yourself. That's what keeps things easy." When she left the kitchen, I stared at the bubbles swirling down the drain. I wanted to laugh at myself. But what happens when the laughter always comes at your expense? Over the next few weeks, the teasing grew bolder. One evening, Daniel came home carrying grocery bags. I hurried to help, but Emily gently blocked me. "Mom, careful, these are heavy." "I can handle it," I said. She smiled sweetly. "I know, but Daniel gets nervous when you lift things. Right, honey?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, Mom, just take it easy." I froze, a smile still plastered on my face. Of course. When they walked past, I caught my reflection in the window. My hands trembling slightly. I wasn't angry, only displaced. like a guest in my own home. It reached its worst on Thanksgiving. I'd been planning for weeks: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, even Robert's favorite pecan pie. Daniel's colleagues were joining, along with Emily's parents. The house smelled of cinnamon and butter. Every corner sparkled. I wanted everything perfect, not for praise, but for love. As everyone sat down, Emily raised her glass. "Here's to family," she said, smiling at Daniel. Old traditions, new beginnings. They all clinked glasses. I smiled, feeling the warmth of belonging again. But halfway through dinner, Emily noticed the stuffing looked a bit too dry. "Oh no," she said, laughing. "Mom, did you forget to cover it while baking?" Her mother giggled. "It happens to the best of us." I chuckled weakly. "Maybe a little too long in the oven." Emily grinned. "Next time, I'll show you my trick. I use broth instead of water. It keeps it moist." Everyone murmured agreement. Daniel added lightly, "Yeah, M's stuffing is unbeatable." The room filled with laughter and clinking forks. I kept smiling, though I could feel the edges of my heart cracking. Later, when I went to the kitchen to fetch dessert, I heard her whisper to her mother, "She tries so hard. Bless her heart." Those 3 words, "bless her heart," sounded sweet, but I knew what they meant: pity, condescension wrapped in politeness. I carried the pie back, placed it on the table, and excused myself quietly. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. My lipstick had faded, my eyes were red. I whispered, "You're fine. You're still the mother." But inside, something small and bright went dark. For weeks after Thanksgiving, I felt the distance grow thicker. Emily began finishing Daniel's sentences when he spoke to me. She handled the bills, the house maintenance, the plans. My role shrank to quiet gestures: folding laundry, watering plants, keeping memories alive. When I'd speak, she'd often correct me, gently but publicly. Once, I told Daniel, "You were born during the worst snowstorm of that year." Emily laughed. "Actually, Mom, the news archives say it was the second worst." I checked when we made his birthday scrapbook. Everyone chuckled. I smiled again, but inside, something inside me whispered, "You're being erased, one correction at a time." One night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The moonlight spilled across the floor like silver threads. I thought about calling my sister, but it was late. So instead, I wrote a letter, not to send, just to breathe. "Dear Robert, it's getting hard to stay kind. I promised you I would, but sometimes I feel invisible in the very house we built." She doesn't mean to hurt me, I think, but her jokes bruise like hail. Daniel laughs with her, and I can't blame him. She's young, alive, charming. Maybe I'm just the echo of something he's already outgrown. I wish you were here to tell me how to reach her, or how to let go without losing him. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it in the old cookie tin where I kept my keepsakes: Daniel's baby bracelet, a lock of Robert's hair, a faded love note from decades ago. Then I whispered into the quiet, "I'm still here. I'm still trying." The cracks in the heart rarely start with anger. They start with silence, the kind that swells until it has its own weight. And though I didn't know it then, those cracks would soon split open, because one day, in front of the very man I raised, the woman I'd tried so hard to love, would finally cross the line between teasing and cruelty. And once words are spoken in front of love, they can never be taken back. There are days you never forget, not because of what happened, but because of how it made you feel. For me, it wasn't just another argument. It was the moment I realized that kindness, when unguarded, can make you a target. It was a Saturday morning in March, the kind that promises spring, but still carries the chill of winter. Daniel was home for once. No work calls, no deadlines, just the 3 of us having breakfast. I'd made pancakes, the way he liked them when he was little. Extra butter, just a hint of cinnamon. I set the plate in front of him. "You used to eat 5 of these before soccer practice," I teased. He laughed. "Guess I'll stop at 2 today." Emily smiled. "He's on a diet, Mom. His trainer says sugar is the enemy." I laughed softly. "Oh, honey, life's too short to fight with pancakes." "True," Daniel said, cutting into one. "These are worth breaking rules for." I smiled. For a brief second, everything felt the way it used to. Then Emily looked at him and said, "Maybe next time you can teach Mom your protein recipe, so she doesn't have to cook with all that butter." She laughed lightly, expecting me to join in. Daniel chuckled awkwardly. "Emily." "What?" she said. "I'm just saying. Healthier options wouldn't hurt." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was safer than silence. But deep inside, something cracked. Later that afternoon, Daniel asked if we could all go out for lunch. Emily suggested a new cafe downtown, trendy, loud, all white walls and glass tables. It wasn't my kind of place, but I agreed. When we arrived, Emily greeted the hostess like they were old friends. She led us to a table near the window, already chatting about interior design, renovations, future plans. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, listening. Halfway through lunch, Emily started telling a story about how she'd rescued the kitchen from my old-school habits. Honestly, she said, laughing, when I first moved in, I couldn't find a single spice labeled properly. There was one jar that said magic powder. I was terrified to use it. Everyone at the table, Daniel and two of his colleagues who had joined us unexpectedly, laughed. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. That's just paprika, I said softly. Robert used to call it that. It was our little joke. Emily blinked, then laughed again. Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I just thought it was funny. One of Daniel's friends grinned. Sounds like you had your hands full modernizing the place, Emily. Oh, you have no idea, she said. It was like stepping back into the 90s. They laughed again. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. I stared down at my napkin, twisting it between my fingers. Daniel said nothing. He just sat there, eating quietly. That silence, his silence, hurt more than her words. Because silence, when you expect protection, feels like betrayal. When we got home, I went straight to my room and shut the door. My hands were shaking as I sat on the edge of my bed. I thought of Robert again. You're the heart of this family, Maggie. But hearts can only take so much before they start to break. A few minutes later, there was a knock. Daniel peeked in. Hey, Mom, you okay? I nodded quickly. Of course, he came in frowning. You seemed upset earlier. Why would I be upset? I said, forcing a smile. He sighed. Come on, Mom. Emily didn't mean anything. You know how she jokes? I know, I said softly. She's very funny. He looked at me for a long moment, unsure how to respond. Then he said, she really does care about you. She just doesn't always say things right. I wanted to tell him that care isn't real if it leaves bruises. But instead, I said, I'm sure you're right. He smiled weakly, kissed my forehead, and left. When the door closed, I let the tears fall, quietly, like rain on a window that no one notices until the glass fogs over. The next day, I decided to keep my distance. I busied myself with gardening, long walks, visits to the library. I stopped offering help in the kitchen. I stopped correcting her when she put the knives in the wrong drawer. Emily noticed. One afternoon, she came to me while I was folding laundry. Mom, are you mad at me? I looked up. Of course not. You've been quiet. I'm just tired. She hesitated. You know, I didn't mean to embarrass you at lunch. I smiled gently. I know, dear. She looked relieved. Good. Because Daniel said you took it too personally. That cut deeper than anything. I see, I said. Yeah, she continued, unaware. He was like, Mom's sensitive. But I told him it's fine. We'll all laugh about it later. I folded the last towel carefully. Yes, I whispered. We will. When she left the room, I sat down on the bed and closed my eyes. I felt smaller than I had in years. It wasn't anger anymore. It was sadness, a kind that settles deep, like dust in the corners of a forgotten room. That night, I wrote another letter I'd never send. Dear Robert, I finally understand what silence costs. It costs a part of you each time you swallow words that deserve to be spoken. She made me the punchline of her story today. And he let her. I'm not angry with him. He loves her. I just wish love didn't make people blind to the ones who loved them first. I wonder what you'd say if you were here. Would you tell me to forgive her? To stand up for myself? I don't know how to do either anymore. I folded the letter, placed it in the tin, and blew out the lamp. As darkness filled the room, I whispered, one day she'll understand. One day she'll know how words can wound. And though I couldn't see the future then, I was right. That day would come. But first there would be more silence, more pain, more cracks to fill, because healing doesn't begin with an apology. It begins with breaking. Sometimes silence can protect peace, and sometimes it can destroy it. For weeks after that lunch, I lived in quiet motion. Washing dishes, watering the garden, folding laundry. I moved through the house like a shadow that belonged to no one. Emily and Daniel filled the air with conversation. Laughter, plans, and I stayed on the edges, listening but not belonging. Then one Sunday, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in that soft, shattering way that only someone who's been quiet too long can feel. It started with the vase. It was early afternoon, and the sun poured through the living room windows, catching every fleck of dust in the air. I was polishing Robert's old oak cabinet, the one he'd built with his own hands, when I heard Emily calling, Mom? Can you come here for a second? Her tone was sharp, hurried. I wiped my hands and walked into the kitchen. There she stood, holding pieces of shattered porcelain in her palms. The blue vase my sister had given me years ago. The one with delicate white lilies painted along its curve. Oh no, I whispered, stepping forward. What happened? Emily sighed dramatically. It fell when I was moving the blender. I looked at the floor. Tiny shards glittered like snowflakes. I'm so sorry, she said quickly. But there was no real sorrow in her voice. Just the irritation of someone caught in an inconvenience. It's all right, I said softly, bending to pick up the pieces, but she stopped me. No, don't. I'll handle it. You'll cut yourself. She reached for the broom, then added, almost carelessly, honestly, it was taking up counter space anyway. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I froze. Counter space? She shrugged. It didn't really go with the modern vibe, you know? We're trying to make the kitchen look fresh. Daniel and I were actually thinking of redoing the shelves. I blinked slowly, feeling the air tighten around me. That vase, I said, belonged to my mother. Oh, she frowned, finally realizing. I didn't know that. You never asked. She looked uncomfortable, then defensive. Well, it's just a vase, Mom. You're taking this a bit. Don't, I said softly, cutting her off. Please don't. For a moment we just stood there. Me, holding the past in my hands, and her, standing in the brightness of the present, untouched by it. Then, Daniel walked in. What's going on? Emily jumped to speak first. Your mom's upset about that old vase. It fell when I was cleaning. Daniel looked at the shards. That's unfortunate. He turned to me. Mom, it's okay. We'll get another one. And that's when I felt it. That quiet tearing inside me, like an invisible seam finally giving way. I looked at my son. My voice came out trembling. You can't replace memories, Daniel. They're not things you buy again, he sighed. I didn't mean it that way. I know, I said. But you don't see me anymore, do you? Either of you. Emily's eyes widened. That's not fair. No, I said, shaking my head. It's not fair. It hasn't been fair for a long time. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Mom, please, can we not do this right now? I smiled. The kind of smile that hides too much pain. You're right. It's never the right time when it's my heart that's breaking. Then I turned and walked out. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the backyard, sitting on the old swing Robert had built. The air was heavy with the scent of lilacs. For the first time, I let myself think the unthinkable. Maybe it was time to move out. This wasn't my home anymore. It was theirs. I imagined renting a small apartment near the lake, maybe volunteering at the library. I'd miss Daniel, but at least I'd have peace. As I rocked back and forth, I felt tears slide down my cheeks. I didn't even bother to wipe them away. That's when I heard the screen door creak open. Mom? It was Daniel. He walked toward me, his steps hesitant. Can we talk? I nodded without looking up. He sat beside me on the swing. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The creak of the chains filled the silence between us. Then he said quietly, I'm sorry. I turned to him. For what? For not standing up for you today. For not seeing how much all this has hurt you. The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. You didn't mean to. No, but I should have noticed, he said. I keep thinking Emily and you will find common ground. But I guess I've been pretending everything's fine. I took a shaky breath. She's not a bad person, Daniel. She just doesn't understand yet. I was her once. Proud, impatient, thinking love made me right about everything. He looked down. She shouldn't talk to you like that, Mom. It's not about words, I said softly. It's about what's missing between them. Kindness. That's something you can't teach until someone's ready to learn. He nodded slowly. We sat in silence for a while longer. The sky turned gold, then purple. Before he went inside, Daniel squeezed my hand. I'll talk to her. I promise. I smiled faintly. Don't fight on my behalf. Just listen to her. Maybe she's fighting battles you don't see. When he left, I whispered to the fading light. Please let this be the breaking point that leads to healing, not destruction. That night, Emily knocked on my door. Her voice was small, unsure. Can we talk? I hesitated, then opened it. She stood there, eyes red. Daniel told me what you said. That you don't hate me. I don't, I said gently. Hate is heavy. I'm too tired to carry it. Her lip trembled. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I always felt like you were judging me. I shook my head. No, sweetheart. I was only hoping you'd let me in. She started crying then. Real tears. Not the kind that ask for sympathy, but the kind that come from truth finally breaking through. I broke your vase, she said between sobs. And your heart. I pulled her into a hug. It's all right. Both can be mended. And as I held her, I felt something shift, the beginning of understanding. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully, but it was the path toward it. That night, when I wrote in my letter tin, I didn't write to Robert. I wrote to Emily. Dear Emily, I see myself in you, the same stubbornness, the same need to be heard. I once thought being right mattered most. But love isn't a debate. It's a bridge built with patience and small kindnesses. You hurt me, yes. But you also reminded me that even broken things can bloom again when tended with care. Margaret, when I put the letter away, I looked at the empty space where the vase used to be. Then I imagined filling it with fresh flowers tomorrow. Not lilies, but sunflowers, because even after the storm, they always find the light. I used to think apologies were simple, just words that close a wound. But they're not. They're the trembling hands that try to stitch together what was torn apart. The morning after our talk, the house felt different. The air wasn't heavy anymore. It was tender, uncertain, like the quiet after a storm, when you don't yet know if the clouds are truly gone. I woke early, as always, and stood by the window watching mist rise from the lawn. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. Downstairs I heard soft footsteps. Emily. She entered the kitchen quietly, hair tied back, wearing Daniel's old sweatshirt. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning," I said. She poured herself coffee and hesitated before sitting across from me. There was a pause. Not an awkward one, just the kind that asks for courage. Then she said, "I need to say something." I nodded, waiting. "I've been unfair to you?" Her voice wavered. "When I first came here, I felt like I had to prove myself, like I had to be the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the one who could do everything better. And instead of learning from you, I tried to compete with you." Her honesty stunned me. I didn't interrupt. She looked down at her mug. "Every time you helped me, I felt small. Not because of you, because of me. I thought if Daniel saw you as the center of his world, there'd be no room for me." I took a slow breath. "Oh, Emily," she blinked back tears. "So I joked, I criticized, I tried to make you look silly." I told myself it was harmless. But yesterday, when Daniel told me how sad you were, I realized I wasn't winning anything. I was just breaking the only person who ever treated me like family. My throat tightened. For months, I'd imagined this moment, but never like this, never with such trembling sincerity. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing it. That means more than you think." She shook her head. "No, I don't deserve thanks. I just want to fix what I broke." I smiled faintly. "Then start by sitting down with me as a daughter would." She did. And that small gesture, no grand apologies, no rehearsed speeches, began the healing. We sat together for over an hour, just talking. About Daniel, about work, about small things. Then, somewhere in the middle of laughter and coffee refills, she said, "Tell me about Robert. You don't talk about him much." I froze, then smiled softly. He was the kind of man who believed love wasn't about saying "I love you" every day. It was about showing it in small ways. Fixing leaky faucets, bringing home wildflowers from the roadside. She listened quietly, eyes bright. "You must miss him." "Every day," I said, "but he's still here. In this house. In Daniel. In the things he built with his hands." Emily reached out and touched my hand. "I'd like to hear more stories about him sometime." "You will," I said, and I meant it. That afternoon, Emily surprised me. I was pruning the roses when she came outside carrying a box. "Don't get mad," she said, smiling nervously. "What did you do now?" I teased. She opened the box and pulled out a new vase. Simple, elegant, white porcelain with hand-painted blue lilies. "It's not the same," she said, "but I found it at a local antique shop. It reminded me of yours." I touched it gently. "It's beautiful," she hesitated. "Do you forgive me?" I looked at her, really looked. The young woman who once made me feel so small was now standing before me, fragile and brave, asking not for approval, but for grace. "I forgave you long before you asked," I said softly. "I just needed you to want forgiveness." Her eyes filled. "Thank you." We placed the vase together on the shelf. It didn't erase what had happened, but somehow, it made the space feel whole again. When Daniel came home that evening, he stopped short in the doorway. "Wow," he said, looking between us. "Did I walk into an alternate universe?" Emily laughed. "No, just a repaired one." He smiled, relieved. "Good. I was starting to think I'd need family therapy on speed dial." We all laughed. Not forced, not nervous, but real laughter that finally felt like home. After dinner, Daniel and Emily went for a walk, leaving me by the fireplace. I sat there, watching the flames dance, thinking about how thin the line is between resentment and understanding. Sometimes, all it takes to cross it is a moment of truth spoken out loud. Before bed, Emily knocked on my door again. She held something behind her back. "What's that?" I asked. She grinned. "A peace offering." She handed me a small handwritten card. On the front, she'd drawn 2 hands, one older, one younger, holding a single sunflower. Inside it said, "For Margaret, the woman who taught me that love doesn't compete, it completes." My eyes blurred. "This is beautiful, sweetheart." She hugged me tight. "Thank you for giving me another chance," I whispered against her shoulder. "Thank you for taking it." That night, as I sat by my window, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. The house no longer felt divided. It breathed again. I took out my letter tin. This time, I didn't write to Robert or Emily. I just wrote a single line to myself. Forgiveness is the language only love can translate. I folded it, placed it in the box, and smiled. Outside, the moonlight touched the new vase on the table, making it glow softly, a quiet symbol of what we'd rebuilt. It's strange how quickly a house can change its tune once the hearts inside it start beating in rhythm again. For months, our home had echoed with quiet tension, the kind that lived between footsteps, in the sound of closed doors and polite smiles. But after that apology, the air felt lighter. Even the morning light seemed softer, kinder, as if the house itself had been waiting for peace. Emily began joining me for breakfast again. Not every day. She was still learning to navigate her humility, but often enough to remind me that she was trying. One morning she came in carrying her tablet. "So," she said, sitting down across from me, "I want your advice." "My advice?" I laughed softly. "You're brave," she grinned. "I'm serious. There's this new position opening at the hospital, head of patient outreach. It's bigger hours, more stress, but also a chance to do something meaningful." I poured her coffee and smiled. "It sounds wonderful." "I thought so too," she said. "But Daniel's worried I'll burn out." I nodded thoughtfully. "He worries because he loves you. But don't let fear decide for you. If you feel called to do it, do it. You're strong enough." She looked at me for a long moment. "You really think so?" "I know so." That small moment, a daughter-in-law asking her mother-in-law for guidance, might not mean much to some, but to me, it was everything. It was proof that bridges can be built from the ruins of pride. In the following weeks, we found a new rhythm. Emily would help me with the garden. I'd help her plan meals for her long shifts. One evening, while we were planting tulip bulbs in the backyard, she said, "You know, I used to think you didn't like me." I smiled gently. "And I used to think you wanted me gone." She laughed, shaking her head. "We were both wrong." "Yes," I said. "But maybe we needed that misunderstanding to see each other clearly." She looked up from the soil, her face glowing in the fading light. "You're wiser than I gave you credit for," I chuckled. "Age has to be good for something." That night, as I watched her and Daniel cook together, laughing and teasing, I felt something I hadn't in years: belonging. Not because I was part of their plans, but because I was part of their hearts. A few days later, Emily asked if I'd like to go shopping with her. "To the farmer's market," she said. "You can help me pick produce." Apparently, I'm terrible at picking good avocados. I raised an eyebrow. "You're admitting a flaw?" She smirked. "Don't get used to it." The market was buzzing that morning. Music, chatter, the scent of baked bread and coffee. Emily walked beside me, linking her arm through mine. It was such a small gesture, yet it nearly brought tears to my eyes. We wandered through stalls, sampling jams and cheeses. She asked about recipes I used to make for Robert. I told her about his favorite, chicken pot pie with extra thyme. "Daniel loves pot pie," she said. "Would you teach me how to make it?" I smiled. "Of course." That evening, we cooked together in the kitchen. She rolled dough clumsily, getting flour all over her shirt. We laughed until our sides hurt. When Daniel came home and tasted it, he looked between us in disbelief. "Wait," he said, mouthful. "You two cooked together? Voluntarily?" "Miracles happen," Emily said, winking at me. And for the first time, laughter didn't just fill the room. It filled the space between us that used to ache. One afternoon, while organizing the attic, I found a box of old photo albums. Emily climbed up the ladder, curious. "Wow," she said, brushing off the dust. "These look ancient." "Careful," I teased. "That's my youth you're talking about." We sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through pages. Daniel's baby photos, family picnics, our first Christmas in this house. She laughed at Daniel's bowl haircut. "He looks like a tiny mushroom." I snorted. That was his father's doing. Robert thought he could save money by cutting hair himself. We laughed until tears rolled down our cheeks. Then she turned a page and froze. It was our wedding anniversary photo. Robert and I were holding hands, standing in front of this very house, smiling like two people who believed love could last forever. "You two looked so happy," Emily whispered. "We were," I said softly. "Not perfect, but deeply happy." She studied the photo, then looked at me. "I hope Daniel and I have what you had." I smiled. touching the edge of the picture. You will, if you remember that love is less about being right and more about being kind. She nodded slowly, as if memorizing the words. Over the next few months, she began to change in small, quiet ways. She stopped snapping when things didn't go her way. She started asking about my day, not out of obligation, but genuine care. Sometimes she'd leave a mug of tea by my door after late-night shifts with a note, "Thought you might need this." And one morning, when I came downstairs, I found a single sunflower in a small vase. The same flower she'd drawn on that apology card. A note beside it read, "For your window, so you always wake up to light." I smiled so hard it hurt. Life wasn't perfect. We still had disagreements about recipes, home decor, the thermostat. She liked it tropical. I liked it reasonable. But even in those moments, there was laughter instead of resentment. We'd finally learned how to speak love in each other's language. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace sipping cocoa, Emily said quietly, "You know, if I ever have a daughter, I hope I'll have your patience." I looked at her with soft amusement. Patience isn't something you're born with, sweetheart. It's something life teaches you, whether you like it or not. She smiled. "Then I hope life teaches me gently." "Me too," I whispered. Before bed, I added another note to my letter tin. Not a letter this time, just a thought. Sometimes, the hardest bridges to build are between two people who both mean well, but love differently. But once that bridge is built, the view from the middle is beautiful. I closed the lid, placed it back on my shelf, and felt peace wash over me. The house that had once echoed with tension now hummed with life again. Laughter, warmth, forgiveness. And as I turned off the light, I realized something simple yet profound. Love doesn't need to be loud to be strong. Sometimes it just needs to stay. As I've grown older, I've realized that life has a way of circling back. Lessons you thought you'd already learned come knocking again. Wearing new faces, speaking softer truths. For me, that lesson has always been about love. How it changes, how it forgives, how it stays even after everything else fades. It's funny. When you're young, you think love is about holding on. But when you're older, you learn it's also about knowing when to let go. Of pride, of hurt, of the need to be right. And that's what I wanted Emily to understand. It was a quiet Sunday morning. One of those perfect autumn days when the world feels made of gold. The trees outside were glowing, the air was crisp, and the kitchen smelled like apple pie. Emily sat at the table, scrolling through recipes on her tablet. "I'm thinking of making something special for Daniel tonight," she said. "He's been so stressed with work." I smiled. "That's thoughtful of you." She looked up. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Did you ever feel invisible when you were younger? Like no one noticed how much you were giving until you stopped giving?" Her question surprised me. I put down the rolling pin and leaned against the counter. "All the time," I said, "especially when Robert was still alive and Daniel was little. I used to think love meant doing everything, making sure everyone else was happy. But after a while, I realized I'd forgotten how to let them see me." Emily frowned. "How do you fix that?" "You don't," I said gently. "You just stop hiding. You stop waiting for someone to notice your goodness and start living from it instead. That's when they begin to notice." She thought about that for a moment, then said, "I wish I'd met you when I was younger." I smiled. "You wouldn't have liked me back then. I was too proud, too serious, too afraid to admit I didn't have it all figured out." She laughed softly. "I don't believe that." "Oh, it's true," I said. "Robert used to tell me, 'Maggie, you're the strongest person I know. But even steel bends under pressure.' I think he meant that strength isn't always about standing tall. Sometimes it's about knowing when to soften." She looked at me with that thoughtful gaze she gets when she's really listening, not just with her ears, but with her heart. And in that moment I realized she wasn't just hearing me, she was learning me. Later that day, while we were setting the table, Emily said, "You've been through so much, but you never sound bitter. How do you do that?" I smiled faintly. "Because bitterness doesn't keep you warm at night. Forgiveness does." She paused, holding a plate in her hands. "I wish my own mom were more like you," she said quietly. "We barely talk these days. She thinks I've changed too much." I touched her arm gently. "You have changed. That's what life does to us. But change doesn't mean losing who you were. It just means you've become someone new, and that's okay." She nodded slowly, blinking away tears. "You always know what to say," I laughed. "Only because I've lived long enough to run out of the wrong things." We both laughed then, and it felt like a moment that would stay with her, and with me, for a long, long time. That evening, after dinner, we sat together on the porch. The sky was streaked with violet and gold, the air cool and gentle. Daniel had gone inside to take a call, leaving the two of us wrapped in quiet. Emily broke the silence first. "I used to think being married meant being perfect, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect woman. But I think I finally get it now. What do you get? I asked. That perfection is exhausting, she said, smiling wryly. And unnecessary, I chuckled softly. Now you're learning fast. She turned to me, serious again. I also learned something else. From you. Oh? That family isn't just who you're born to. It's who you choose to keep showing up for, even when it's hard. My chest tightened with emotion. That's a good lesson, I said. Better than anything I could have taught you. She smiled shyly. Maybe, but I learned it by watching you. And that was the moment, the one every mother waits for. The moment when you realize your quiet sacrifices, your tears, your sleepless nights, they didn't go unnoticed after all. They were shaping someone, teaching them, loving them. When she went inside, I stayed a little longer, looking out at the darkening sky. Fireflies were beginning to glow among the grass. I thought of Robert. You'd be proud of her, I whispered. Of us. I could almost hear his voice, that warm chuckle saying, told you love would find its way back. I smiled, letting the peace of that thought sink into me. Before bed, I added a final note to my letter tin. The real lesson of motherhood isn't about teaching someone else how to live. It's about living in a way that shows them how love survives everything, even misunderstanding, even pain. I closed the lid and placed it beside the vase with the blue lilies, now filled with fresh sunflowers. They stood tall in the soft light, bright and unashamed, just like love. It's been almost 5 years since that autumn when everything changed. Sometimes I wake up and the sunlight coming through the kitchen window looks exactly the same, golden and kind, and I can almost believe I'm still living that day when Emily first apologized to me. But then I hear the sound of little feet running down the hallway, and I remember how far we've come. Yes, little feet. Emily and Daniel's daughter Lily is 4 now. A wild, laughing, twirling storm of curls and questions. She calls me Nana Maggie, and when she hugs me, I swear the years melt right off my bones. There's something about holding a grandchild that makes all your old pain seem like it was leading to this exact moment, as if life was weaving every broken thread into something beautiful all along. Last Sunday, we had everyone over for dinner. Daniel, Emily, Lily, and even Emily's mom, who started visiting more often. Time has softened her too. We were all crowded around the table, passing bowls of mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables, when Lily looked at me with her serious little face and said, Nana, how do you make everyone stop being mad? Everyone laughed softly, but she was so earnest that I answered, Well, sweetheart, I said, you just love them louder than the anger. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. That small gesture, simple, wordless, said everything. After dinner, when the others were cleaning up, I sat on the porch with my cup of tea, the same way I always do when I want to listen to the night. The crickets were singing, and the air smelled faintly of pine and rain. Daniel came out and sat beside me. He's older now, the first silver threads starting to show in his hair. But in moments like this, I still see the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. He looked at me quietly for a while, then said, You know, Mom, I used to think you were just strong, like nothing ever broke you. I smiled faintly. And now? Now I know you were breaking all the time, he said softly. You just didn't let anyone see it, I chuckled. Mothers aren't made of stone, Daniel. We're made of hope, he laughed quietly. You always know how to make things sound like poetry. That's just the truth dressed up nice, I said. He nodded slowly. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on us. I looked at him, my son, my heart walking around outside my body, and said, That's what mothers do. We keep holding the light, even when no one else can see it. When he went inside, I sat there a while longer, watching the stars blink awake, and I thought about the long road that had brought me here, the tears, the silences, the misunderstandings, the nights I cried alone, thinking maybe love had gone for good, but it hadn't. It had just changed shape. It had grown quieter, deeper, like a river that flows beneath the ground, but never stops moving. And now, that same love ran through this house again, in laughter, in forgiveness, in tiny feet racing through the hallway. Sometimes Emily joins me on the porch after everyone's asleep. She brings a blanket and a glass of wine, and we talk softly, like 2 old friends instead of in-laws. One night she said, I used to think you were judging me. I was, I said honestly. At least at first. I thought you were trying to replace me in Daniel's life, but I see now that you were just trying to find your own place. She smiled, her eyes shining. And I was trying so hard to make him love me the way he loves you. I reached for her hand. He loves us differently, sweetheart. A son's love for his mother and a husband's love for his wife. They're not supposed to compete. They're supposed to complete each other. She nodded. her lips trembling just a little. I know that now. I'm sorry it took me so long to see. I squeezed her hand. The best lessons always take time. We sat there quietly after that, wrapped in the soft night air, and I realized that forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process, like breathing. You have to keep doing it to stay alive. The next morning I found Lily in the garden, picking daisies. She looked up at me and said, "Nana, look, I'm making a crown for Mommy." I smiled, kneeling beside her. "That's beautiful, honey. Do you want one too?" she asked. "Oh, I think one crown in the family is plenty." I laughed. She shook her head seriously. "No, Nana, you need one too. Because Mommy says you're the queen of this house." I felt my throat tighten as she placed the daisy crown on my head. It was crooked and messy and absolutely perfect. That afternoon, when Emily saw me wearing it, she laughed and said, "Well, looks like Lily's picked her favorite person again." I smiled softly. "She's just smart enough to know there's room for all kinds of love." Emily walked over, hugging me tightly. "You taught her that," she whispered. And maybe she was right. Maybe after all these years, after all the storms and lessons and tears, that's what I'd been teaching without even knowing. That love doesn't run out. It just keeps circling back, finding new ways to live inside us. That night, before bed, I wrote one last entry for my letter tin. "Dear Lily, when you're old enough to read this, you'll have your own world, your own joys and heartbreaks. And I hope you remember something your Nana learned the hard way, that kindness is never wasted. Even when it's met with silence, even when it's misunderstood. Because kindness, my love, always finds its way back. Love, always, Nana Maggie." I sealed the letter and placed it beside the others. A quiet collection of love stories written in real life, not ink. As I turned off the lamp, I looked around the house one last time. There was laughter in the walls, warmth in the air, and peace in my heart. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole, because the circle was complete. Because love, real love, had come home again.